The Audible is back in action. I'm with my guys, Donnie Rightside and the Whale Capper, breaking down each and every division 2 months before kickoff of week 1. And now we are on the NFC East. Eagles at 9.5 wins. Eagles poised to win the division. Looks like a 2-horse race with the Eagles and Cowboys. How bad will the Redskins and the Giants be? Your hometown Eagles, Donnie Rightside, what do you think of the NFC East?
Yeah, I think the Eagles are clear-cut the favorite in this, but that's not to say you can't get some value on some of the other teams in this division. I've made a lot of money on the Dallas Cowboys over the past 2 to 3 years. Just because you don't like a team doesn't mean you can't cash in on those teams and win. I think Dallas has a pretty good roster, but one of the things we're going to bring up is, a little bit of team turmoil. One team's paying their big-time players, their star quarterbacks. The other one's saying, not really too sure if you're worth that much. And let's not forget the 2 bottom feeders in the division. Both, to me, are going to start quarterbacks that they have no business starting right out of the gate, and I should be looking forward to it. I like this division. We can spend all day talking about those Philadelphia Eagles, but there's some money to be made here in this division for sure.
There is money to be made in this division. Whale Capper, NFC East.
Yeah, Eagles clearly on top, in my opinion. The Cowboys look just talented enough, just good enough, that improbably Jason Garrett will save his job for another year. Speaking of jobs and people on the hot seat, it'll be interesting to see in Washington if Jay Gruden can figure out a way to keep his job. And then finally, GM of the Giants, Dave Gettleman. Is there anyone in the NFL who deserves to have his job criticized more than Dave Gettleman? These are the key angles, I think, in handicapping this division.
I agree, and let's break the teams down, starting with the Philadelphia Eagles. Win total 9.5, juice to the over at -140. Division, even money. Conference 8-1, Super Bowl 14-1. Carson Wentz needs to play a full season. They bring in Jordan Howard. They have a tough schedule. Andre Dillard can help protect Carson. Nice draft pick. So many weapons. Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson, Nelson Aguilar, Zach Ertz, a elite tight end in Zach Ertz. Defense ranked 13th last year in the NFC. Has it improved enough is a big, big question. And Donnie Rightside, you're just the man to answer this. Has their defense improved enough? Will and should the Eagles win this NFC East?
Yeah, miracle season by the Eagles last year. I mean, you're coming off a Super Bowl. You expected a little bit more, but nobody expected to lose 4 out of 5 starting defensive backs by the end of the season, playing the likes of, the New Orleans, Saints, when you have guys that were basically delivering for FedEx previously before the game, trying to step in and play. But a lot of these backups that should have actually been playing for the Philadelphia Eagles last year gained a lot of really good, support back there and chances to play in some big-time games. This team ends up going to the playoffs and actually winning a playoff game in Chicago, and comes from an Alshon Jeffrey drop of possibly moving on to the NFC title game versus a team they've dominated over the past couple years in the Rams. But let's take a look at 2019. What's to like about those Philadelphia Eagles ending into the season? You take a look at Carson Wentz. And a lot of people, 2 years ago, Carson Wentz was the MVP of the football league before he blows his knee out versus the Los Angeles Rams. Comes back, rushes it the following season, ends up fracturing his back, sitting out the rest of the year. Nick Foles comes in, wins a couple football games, but masked a lot of injury issues that the Philadelphia Eagles did have last year. Now coming into the new season, as we joke, what they have is what you like in an NFL team. Carson Wentz going to be healthy. He goes through the entire offseason process. Doesn't need to use any, anything on his leg, his knee, back is healed up right, and then you get him some wide receivers. The one thing that we always get mad at here in Philadelphia, we don't have a deep play threat. You go out and get Deshaun Jackson that's going to complete that triumvirate. Nelson Aguilar should be able to revert back to 2017 statistics. You also have Alshon Jeffrey coming back last year, a couple years, playing with the injured shoulder, and now he should be healthy as well. A really good offensive line. Running backs that were banged up this year are going to be healthy. The pass rush is going to be healthy. There's a lot to like about the Philadelphia Eagles, but the one thing I don't like about it, there's a tough 3-game stretch in there at Minnesota, at Dallas, and also at the Buffalo Bills. And let's not forget as well, I like to look at schedules in the NFL. The 3rd straight year, the Philadelphia Eagles will be on the road for a Thursday night football game. But the caveat here is the Eagles beat Carolina and the Eagles beat the Giants their last 2 games on Thursday night football. I don't know if they'll be able to get it done this year against the Green Bay Packers, but this is the Eagles division to win.
Whale Capper, how high are you on these Philadelphia Eagles?
I put the Eagles in the upper echelon of NFC teams. I think they are a very real threat to win the Super Bowl. They're clearly, in my opinion, in a class with maybe 2 other teams to win the NFC title. The basis for my thinking there, they have, in my opinion, by far the best front office in football. You need evidence of that. Look at the way they masterfully, moved around the draft to get right in front of the Houston Texans to scoop potentially the best offensive lineman in the entire draft, guy that you absolutely want anchoring your crew to protect the Carson Wentz who's coming off injury. You have a coaching staff that not only is amazing in-game decision making, but they can develop players. Donnie brought up the FedEx guys on the defensive backfield. By the end of the season, they had coached those guys up so they were legitimate NFL players. It was incredible to see. Usually the Seahawks are the only team that I know that can coach up defensive backs like that. But if you have the ability to develop players, then you're going to be your roster is going to be even more talented this year, more effective this year than they were last year. If you have the ability to navigate trades and sign players to shore up your roster as a front office, then you're going to be absolutely effective year over year in this league. I would expect the Eagles not only to be the class of this division, but potentially threaten for the number 1, number 2 overall seed. I think by the time we get halfway through the season, it's going to be pretty clear they're positioning themselves for a home play, bye in a home playoff game. It's tough for me really to say anything more glowing for this team. If you want to point out red flags, we haven't seen 16 games from Carson Wentz now in 2 straight years. That's a little bit concerning. I still believe in Carson Wentz as a quarterback. I still believe in him, in his ability to, continue his progression and be, a year-over-year threat for an MVP type of performance. But top to bottom, Eagles complete roster, impressive coaching staff, impressive front office, and a team that you want to be involved in terms of backing them in the futures market.
A lot to like on these Philadelphia Eagles. 8-1 conference ticket might be something that you want in your arsenal. Let's move on to the Dallas Cowboys. Wins at 8.5. This is also heavily juiced to the over, just like the Eagles, at -140 at my book. Division +130. Very close to the +100 that the Eagles are at. Not a big difference there. Conference 11-1. Super Bowl 22-1. Jason Witten, comeback player of the year, 5-1. Zeke Elliott, most rushing yards at +260. He is the favorite in that category. Offense is expected to improve. Jason Witten returns, and that will help. Zeke Elliott may be the best running back in the league. We saw what Amari Cooper did when he came over from the Raiders. Now they get a full year of him. This defense is very strong. We saw Van Der Esch blossom in front of our eyes, maybe the best linebacker in the league. Donnie Rightside, are people sleeping on these Dallas Cowboys?
I don't know if they're sleeping on the Dallas Cowboys, but I think, they're going to be able, they have a lot of the conditions that you like in order to win football games. And the one thing that you usually didn't look at in the past, Jimmy, was saying, you know what, the Dallas Cowboys, with a really good defense, they do have it. Probably 2 of the best young linebackers in the game that are starting in the middle with Smith and Van Der Esch, and a very good secondary quarter, one of the best, if not the best corner in the NFL in Byron Jones. Solid defensive line, solid pass rush, and also when you take a look at the offensive side of the ball, the quarterback on offense. When we look on the offensive line, Travis Frederick's going to come back this year. That's going to solidify that offensive line. You're right. They have a great running game, and they have wide receiver components that can factor in. But as Whale Capper just talked about the NFC East and the teams that we like, and Doug Peterson and the Eagles making the right calls, how many times do you see Jason Garrett with baffling call after baffling call after baffling call? And it was wild to watch last year in the playoff game when they played the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks coaching like the Cowboys, refusing to let their $100 million quarterback make any plays out there. But how many times in the past have we seen? You have Zeke Elliott, you have a big offensive running game. 3rd and an inch, you're dropping back with Dak Prescott, who's an ineffective, accurate passer, throwing the ball deep down the field. It makes no sense. Whenever you have a quarterback and a coach not in line during the game, sometimes you're going to have a little bit of a penalty on that aspect. But when you're looking at the Cowboys itself, team total of 9, they have the talent they could possibly get there. They have, and when you look at that, I like the good starts on the season. It seems like every single year they get the Giants down there in Jerry World and put a beating on them. You get the Giants at Washington and Miami to open the season. That should be a 3-0, and I have them over their first 7 games at 5-2, which sets up that good mojo. And let's not forget, always have to argue with people on Twitter here, the Dallas Cowboys built in, have the single best schedule in the NFL every single year. And you say, well, why is that, Donnie? They never play a true road Thursday game They always play the Thanksgiving Day game on Thursday at home, and then the NFL says, yeah, they'll play on a Thursday, but they give them 7 days in between, and they play the following Thursday, so they never have that true road game that's such a detriment to other teams. And even with all of that, they still struggle to win playoff games. They still struggle to win the NFC East division, still struggle, haven't won a Super Bowl since the 1990s. There's a lot to like about the Dallas Cowboys. They'll finish in second. They'll be right around that 9-win number. But last point I'll make on the Dallas Cowboys here is you see most organizations tie up their loose ends. Your quarterback going into the season, you want him thinking about a contract? Your best running back, you want him thinking about a contract, or even worse, saying, we have a number for you as a quarterback. I don't think you're worth any more than that. Take it or leave it. That's not a good sign entering into the season.
It's not a good sign, and I've never been high on Dak. I've always felt that he was just a game manager. He did prove me a little bit wrong at times last year, but I'm not a believer in Dak. Are we too low on these Dallas Cowboys, Well Capper?
I think we're all kind of all on the same page here. This is a borderline double-digit win team. This is probably a team that makes a wild card spot and loses on the road in, like, I don't know, Atlanta or New Orleans or something like that. Like, this is the kind of team where last year at home in the playoffs, it took very, very, very poor game plan on the part of the Seahawks for the Cowboys to escape with a win. They go to the Rams, and legitimately their offensive game plan kept them from advancing to the NFC title game. It was all there for the taking. They have an extremely talented roster. They have clearly, in my opinion, the most talented offensive line in the NFL, at least top three. They have young, very talented defensive core. The nucleus of their defense in terms of in the center of the front seven, as well as the playmakers they have in their secondary, are outstanding. They are going to be a good defense. They are going to be a team you're going to look to probably back, unders in terms of game totals over the course of the season, because they are going to frustrate the hell out of their opposing offenses. All that said, Jason Garrett, you cannot count on him when you absolutely have to have him make the key decision in terms of, do I punt it here or do I go for it on fourth down? Do we go for, we're trying to run out the clock? Do we just run Zeke Elliott into a stacked box 3 times here and punt the ball back and give the opposing team a chance to come back and tie or win? He consistently proves himself incapable in those scenarios. That's going to cost them wins when, against the upper echelon teams in the NFL. That's probably going to cost them in the playoffs when it comes to, playing the best teams in the NFC, presumably on the road, because I don't know that they're going to be able to beat the Eagles and get home field. All of this spells do just enough to keep Jason Garrett around for another season, do just enough to run it all back, do just enough to pay Dak Prescott more money than he's worth to keep him at quarterback. This is kind of the, Groundhog Day, so to speak, for the Cowboys, what we saw from them the last couple of years and what we will see for them for the next couple of years. After they pay Prescott, they're going to have to pay Zeke Elliott. They're going to lose, some players in free agency by attrition because they're going to have so much money tied up in those guys. And Jason Garrett's not the kind of coach that I think is ever going to get them over the hump. So if you're a Cowboys fan, this is the hard truth. I'm sorry to be saying this to you, but welcome to purgatory. You're going to be here for a while.
On the bright side, we do not have to hear Jason Witten on Thursday Night Football. Man, was he terrible. Terrible. Hopefully we never have to hear him again. Okay, let's move on to the Washington Redskins. Redskins and Giants win totals should be at 6, but at my book, they have the Redskins win total at 5.5, heavily juiced to the over, and the Giants win total at 6.5, heavily juiced to the under. Let's talk about this Redskins team. Wins 5.5, over -160, division +900, conference +4,000, Super Bowl +8,000, 80-1. Case Keenum comes in. Dwayne Haskins is being drafted as an understudy. How are they going to handle that? That is a tricky situation. Darius Geis could be a beast if he's healthy. If he's healthy, he's going to be much, much better than Adrian Peterson. And I hope we get to watch Geis. Josh Doxson needs to step up at wide receiver. Jordan Reed and old Vernon Davis at tight end. The defense could be better. Ryan Kerrigan at linebacker. Jonathan Allen getting to the quarterback. Josh Norman at cornerback. But question marks, red flags, issues with this Redskins team. Donnie Rightside, how do you see the Washington Redskins this year?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well there, Jimmy, to start it off, because when you look at the Washington Redskins, there's a lot to like individual talent-wise, but when you mold it all together, it doesn't really look forward to us that they're going to have a lot of wins at this point. Now, the reason being is here, I think, from a head coaching perspective, you got what you think, at least your organization thinks, is going to be the future of your team at quarterback here. How quickly he hits the field, that's going to be interesting. But I actually think they have a built-in trapdoor hatch when we're looking overall that nobody's going to get really too mad, because when you look at the opening season, I don't care if you have Dwayne Haskins in or if you have Case Keenum. You're going to Philadelphia. You're going to play Dallas. Then you get the Chicago Bears. Then you go on the road to the Giants division. And then you have New England. To me, that sets up as an 0-5 perfect shot, Game 6 to finally get Dwayne Haskins in there. Case Keenum's not going to lead you to a victory on the road, even though how bad the Giants are. Case Keenum's not going to go on the road and beat the Philadelphia Eagles. They're not going to beat the Dallas Cowboys, even though they are at home Game 2. I think it's a perfect scenario to look forward to. So when you're betting teams and betting team totals, the hardest ones to gauge are what I like to call the bridge teams, that they have a quarterback in place who they don't want anywhere near being the future of the team because Dwayne Haskins in it. But would you want to go out and say, hey, Dwayne, why don't you go out the first 5 weeks and get your brains beat in and damage you? Or you take all the pressure off and say, hey, Dwayne Haskins, get out there, buddy. We're 0-5. It can't get any worse. Just go out. You'll make some mistakes. We'll see if we can win, and we'll focus on next year. I want no piece of the team total for the Redskins. If they had Alex Smith, who's the king of dink and dunk, they probably would end up with another 8-8 football team or maybe even 9 wins because he'd be able to manage the game. This team doesn't have a starting quarterback and will bring in a rookie quarterback. I want nothing to do with the Washington Redskins here, Jimmy.
I want nothing to do with them either. Whale Capper, one of my favorite plays of your season last season was after Adrian Peterson had that giant 200-yard game. You were heavy on him having an under in the next game, and he rushed for about 12 yards in that next game. How do you see these Washington Redskins?
I think, what Donnie laid out as far as a strategy for how they should approach their season makes sense. It's sound strategy. The problem is you're dealing with an owner who's not sane, who's not patient. He's not an effective leader of men. And so even though they wildly overachieved last year in the face of some horrific injuries, there's still smoke under Jay Gruden's seat. There's still rumors that he might be the first coach fired. There's still kind of a general, he's not the right guy for this job, which is a problem for Jay Gruden because now he's got to figure out how to break in a new quarterback and save his job. That's not easy. In a division that is stacked at the top, with a schedule that is extremely unfavorable out of the gate. And so all of this really plays to, okay, well, Jay Gruden, he's spending most of his time probably in this preseason figuring out what he's going to do to save his job as opposed to, thinking about like, okay, well, this is how we're going to, maximize our potential to get wins for not just this season, but for future seasons. So I think, there is some incentive on Jay Gruden throwing Haskins out there to the Wolves out of the get-go because they're going to lose those games anyway. And they can point to it and be like, well, what did you expect? We're starting our rookie quarterback, and Jay Gruden can be like, well, I didn't draft this guy, if it really goes poorly, and his best chance for saving his job is to look bad early, to be able to shed the blame on the fact that it's a young team with that's breaking in some new pieces, and then over the course of the season try to build some momentum into the off season and say, hey, look, we're really doing a good job developing Haskins, kind of like the Jets did last year with Sam Darnold, like some kind of scenario like last year's Jets. Feels like the right play for the Redskins this year, and I wouldn't at all be surprised though if there's a complete change on the roster just because Daniel Snyder is not necessarily a patient man. So I'm not interested at all in betting on the Redskins to make their win total. I'm not sure I understand at all why it's gotten some steam to the over. I'm not sure. People are looking at their. People who are forgetting that their record last year probably should have been about 5-6 wins. They won a bunch of games they shouldn't have won. And the guys that are getting back from injury are fine players, but they're not game changers. They lost some pieces in the passing game that I think are problematic. They have holes in the secondary that are problematic. This is a bottom tier NFL roster, in my opinion. Combine that with a first ever starting quarterback likely, and a coach who's on the hot seat, and this spells trouble in Washington if I'm handicapping them.
I agree. There's red flags, giant red flags everywhere. Let's move on to the New York Giants. I have enjoyed enormously shitting all over Eli Manning. I don't know why. I don't know why it brings me this great joy, but it does. And I wonder if this year the Giants could possibly surprise. Their win total is at 6.5 in my book, under a -160, over a +130. 11-1 to win the division, 33-1 to win the conference, 66-1 to win the Super Bowl. Saquon Barkley, most rushing yards at +300. No Odell Beckham. Sterling Shepard, Corey Coleman, Golden Tate are good enough. Not a lot of height, but they're good. They're good receivers. The problem was never the wide receivers. The problem was Eli Manning. Hopefully Daniel Jones gets a shot. I don't know exactly what to make of Daniel Jones when he gets the shot. They have Evan Ingram, a very good tight end. Saquon Barkley will be a workhorse. Is the defense improved? It has to be, I guess. We know it should be in a couple of years. Last year's third-rounder, defensive end B.J. Hill, another year under his belt. First-rounder Dexter Lawrence comes from Clemson. They need more from Janoris Jenkins. Antoine Bethea coming in from Arizona. Is he going to help? Jabril Peppers comes in from Cleveland, gets his gun stolen by a woman who turns up dead. It's great, great stuff.
What?
Yes.
Oh, I missed that story.
That is that's great stuff that I can't wait to talk about all year long. Donnie Rightside, the New York Giants.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's probably going to be on the same page here with the New York Giants in the longevity because nothing they do makes any sense whatsoever. And you guys all know I'm an Eagles fan, right? When I would line up or we would be on Sundays and have to break down a game with the Giants, the only thing in my mind was, boy, this wide receiving core lights us up every single year because Odell Beckham is an unstoppable force, a once-in-a-lifetime wide receiver that your team needs in a passing league, keep in mind, in the NFL. But the Giants are so dumb, they sign guys to huge deals, then burn all those cap dollars, trading them away, and say, you know what? Our chance to finally get a quarterback, we don't have to expend all this money or trade up. Let's just go out and take a running back and have our GM explain it to us like, well, he was the best guy on the board at the time. It's not the way you win in the National Football League. I like it as an Eagles fan because it keeps the Giants that much lower. But when we're talking about Eli Manning, even as a quarterback, he's a shot fighter. He's been a shot fighter for 5 years. How many times in the last 2 years have the Giants been in a close game where they have the ball in the red zone and they didn't even let Eli throw the football for fear that he's probably going to turn it over, and they definitely wanted to get points? It's amazing to see the evolution of the Giants with absolutely no battle cry moving forward that says, here's our stake. And then you go and draft a quarterback that some people don't even rate as a first-round pick or an upper-level echelon starter in the NFL, and then you're going to sit back and say, we would love Eli to play another 3 years here in New York. Nothing makes sense of what they're doing in moving forward in the NFL. When you take a look at their defense, which is the problem, they were 14th in the NFC, not in the NFL, 14th in the NFC, and they trade away their heart and soul in the secondary, Landon Collins, who goes to a division rival down in Washington, and their only pass rushing threat over to Cleveland, which stacks them up. So now you're telling me we're not explosive on offense. Now we can just key in on your running back. Your offensive line has been underperforming for years, and a quarterback that's stuck in cement that throws nonstop interceptions and never makes the right read anymore. And you sit back and say, I think we're on the right path here. The Giants are rudderless. I don't want any piece of. Having said that, they're still going to hover right around the win total that they have because it is the NFL. But nothing makes sense. And is Daniel Jones going to come in week 8, 9, 10? Or if you get out to a 4-4 start like we talked about, hey, let's let it ride it out to see if we can make the playoffs, which you know they're not going to make. The Giants are in some serious trouble this year and moving forward. Good luck.
How much fun is the New York Giants going to be capping all year long? Whale capper, the Giants.
So, yeah, if you want to handicap their season win totals or, you know, if you're trying to make a bet on the Giants, you have to kind of come to some conclusion about what's going to happen with the quarterback position first. It's pretty clear that Gettleman has been talking himself up into Eli Manning still has it based on what you read, what he said in this offseason. It's pretty funny that they drafted Daniel Jones where they drafted him, which was an enormous reach. It's pretty funny that the Eli Manning's camp put a stamp of approval on Daniel Jones, knowing that he wouldn't threaten Eli in competition throughout minicamp, throughout the preseason, throughout probably this whole first season. I think Daniel Jones clearly not ready to take snaps as a starter in the National Football League, and it's going to be apparent to a guy like Pat Shurmur who knows football well. He's been around a long time. He's a fine coach, and I think from my perspective, handicapping this team, I'm expecting you are going to see 16 games from Eli Manning unless he gets hurt. And I think Daniel Jones probably put a pin in him until 2020. So what does it mean then if Eli Manning is trotting out there for 16 games? He's not going to put up the numbers he put up last year because Odell Beckham Jr. is gone. He's not going to be a quarterback who wins you games where you're down, who does impressive things to put you in position to win games that you shouldn't win, right? So, right away, look at their schedule and you can probably cross off like 5-6 games right away, L's, okay? The rest of their schedule, they got some home games. They have Saquon Barkley. We talked about this, I feel like, a bunch last year. I know for sure I did on our podcast. Drafting Saquon Barkley second was a fine decision if you want to be 8-8 for the next 8 years. Like you bought yourself 64 wins over the next 8 years by drafting Barkley. He's a generational talent. He's LaDainian Tomlinson, Adrian Peterson, Barry Sanders, whatever comparison you want to make. Guess what? None of those guys went to the playoffs and won playoff games because they were just good enough that you kept your team from being able to make solid draft picks, but not good enough because they're running backs and they play in a passing league to be, effectively, the make or break players in terms of winning enough games to get to the playoffs or winning games once you get to the playoffs. This is a problem now for the Giants to deal with. They'll never be bad enough to really overhaul their roster. They'll never be good enough to win a playoff game. So just kind of like the Dallas Cowboys are in purgatory where they're kind of right in those wild card spots, kind of on the playoff bubble for the next couple of years. I see the Giants on the other side of the bubble for the next couple of years, probably winning 6-7 games every year, probably seeing, maybe they go a good season for them, a winning season for them is an 8-8 season. Eli Manning goes out as having not had a losing season his final year as the starter in the Giants and rides off into the sunset. They start Daniel Jones next year, and who knows what kind of success they have. But, so I think the bar is low for them in terms of success. If you're going to make a play on them season win total, it's probably the over because they have a pretty easy schedule. They have Saquon Barkley. The only thing you can realistically say about this team, if you're going to try to get involved in the prop market or something like that, we're going to see rushing yardage props, leaders. We're going to see total yardage prop leaders, leader props. Saquon Barkley is probably a good look at those. He's going to get more usage than any other player in the NFL this year. If you're in season-long fantasy, he's the no doubt 1.1 pick off the board, and in the fantasy space, and I don't think that's really an argument. But the franchise is on the wrong side of improving to the point where they're making the playoffs, and I think until the fans kind of really put pressure to get Gettleman out and get someone who's kind of a forward thinker in terms of building a roster in, I don't think you can expect the Giants to be competing for the NFC East anytime soon.
I agree with that immensely, and Jabril Peppers is not a suspect, by the way.
Good. That's good. As I laughed, and I was like, oh, wait, is he should I not be laughing? Like, this sounds bad. This could be bad.
He's not a suspect. He's not a suspect. Okay, that is your NFC East. After we break it all down, I guess I don't see a lot of angles other than I want a little bit on the Eagles to win the conference and the Eagles to win the Super Bowl. Other than that, I don't know if I make any other moves. The division at even money for the Eagles, I mean, it's not a bad look, but I just don't know if there's enough there. Donnie, what are your final thoughts on the NFC East?
Yeah, taking a look, I think it's the Philadelphia Eagles. And anytime you have a double-digit win total, I mean, everything does have to go right. You got to stay healthy. But let's just say the Eagles do. I think they're right on target. They do have a tougher schedule, but to go 11-5, win the NFC East, and maybe push for that second bye or the second overall seed to get a bye week into the playoffs. But I don't sleep on the Dallas Cowboys because they're going to be a really good football team. They'll hover right around that double digits. But again, it's the bottom end where either A, you can burn your bankroll or make a lot of money on either the Giants or the Redskins, depending on the quarterback situation. Well, Capper brought up real quick, if Eli Manning does play out the string in 16 games, he's still a veteran quarterback, although I think he isn't very good. He's much better than what Daniel Jones' opportunity will give you. So if we can get a read and they say, hey, unless he goes down, he's going to start 16 games, the Giants might have a pretty decent shot at that team total and hitting it over.
Interesting. And it's 6.5 in my book, and you get a plus 130 if you take the over if the Giants could win 7 games. Whale Capper, NFC East, final thoughts.
Yeah, I guess Giants over is actually something that I'm warming up to. Their schedule is really, really easy. I mentioned again, Barkley is an amazing player, just not good enough to get them to the playoffs. As far as the Eagles go, I'm even more bullish on them than our Philly friend here, which is I think is a good thing. You're probably kind of emotionally hedging like how you want to feel about this team. 2 years ago, the Eagles learned a bunch of valuable lessons. You go for it on fourth down. You be aggressive. That's how you win games. And you know how you win games in the playoffs? You play at home. They absolutely approached this season thinking we clinched that 1 seed. We are good enough to do it. We go out there and we play our asses off to win every single game. We put ourselves in a position to be playoff hosts, get the crowd involved, have that be the difference when you host the Rams or you host this dome team like the Saints or the Falcons. Like that is how you get to the Super Bowl in the NFC this year. And I think the wins total over is a great look for the Eagles. I would even wait for the alternative win totals because I would like a plus money number on like over 10.5, over 11.5. I think this team is eyeing 12, 13 wins, and I think their floor is 11-5 realistically. So let's go Eagles, fly. This is the way we want to approach this NFC season.
Wow. Very, very exciting takes. Thank you guys so much for watching. On behalf of Donnie Rightside, the Whale Capper, and myself, everybody at Sportsbook Review, thank you so much for watching and commenting. We have no shows without you. Enjoy the football season.